I believe we are live. Welcome, weary travellers. My screen is not very bright. Well, I guess that's not really the end of the world. Just wait until we have some more viewers. Bringing back the monster for these lives. Not sponsored, but if Monster does want to sponsor us, then I'm not going to complain. And I don't know if you can hear the music. I thought it would set the tone. The music is by the Fichte Brothers. I like to play their music in the background. Give it a little medieval D&D kind of feel. Just watch the awkwardness for a little while. Don't mind me playing with the collection of dice I have set up to show people. If you can see. No co-hosting, I apologise. I am hoping that people will interact and things like that, but I don't want any co-hosts for the D&D 101 sessions, unless it's someone that I know, and unfortunately, I did not know you, my friend. Don't want my D&D 101 live going off the rails. Not what you need on a Friday evening. Not when you're about to nerd-splain something to people. Just watch me, you know, awkwardly twirl my thumbs for a minute or two. At least when this goes up on YouTube, you can skip the awkwardness and get straight to when I start. Although I think I might just start now. So this is a revised D&D 101 for people who don't know what the game is, or if they just kind of want to learn more about it. And we're going to be going through the 2024 version of the Player's Handbook. I was going through the 2014 version, but there have been updates, there have been changes, so I will be bearing that in mind as well when going through this. There we go. So, what is D&D? D&D is collective storytelling, basically. You have the bare minimum of things that you need to play D&D. You will need someone to be the DM, you will need players, you will need at least one set of dice, like a weirdo. I mean, who doesn't have several hundred sets of dice? Where are my fellow dice goblins? And most importantly, you'd need your imagination as well. So, I wish I had some minis to show you. So if you are just starting out and you don't have terrain, you don't have the square grids for the combat, you don't have minis, that's completely fine. When we first started, I literally just torn a piece of paper out of a notebook and drew really, really rough grids for combat, and we used post-it notes, different coloured post-it notes for enemies, and we had some little Lego figures, so we use Lego figures for our miniatures. Now we do have our own terrain. We do have a number of different miniatures. Next time I go around to my brother's house, I'll see if I can nab some so I can show you on one of the future lives. But yeah, so if you don't have that when you start out, then that's not a problem. You do need at least one set of dice, which I will show you afterwards, but you know, everything else can come later. So the DM or Dungeon Master, they're the one that runs the game. So they describe the scene. They run the NPCs, they run the enemies, they run the creatures, they run all the monsters that you're going to come across as well. Players will they'll bring their own character to the story, they'll create their backstory, they will interact with other players' characters and the NPCs that the DM voices, and they will move through the DM story and go forth an adventure. The main aspects of D&D are, you've got your social interaction through role-playing, you have, where's my mind gone blank? You have exploration, so delving into dungeons, walking through forests, and you also have combat. That is the bare bones, and we're going to dive into more of those later on, and I'll go through them when we get to them. Yeah, so what I said before about the Dungeon Master running the game, they will be running either one-shots or campaigns. So one-shots are kind of, whenever I've tried to run a one-shot before, it's always been at least three or four sessions long. Usually one-shots are about a 4 or 5 hour session, so they're quite a lot shorter, and it's just basically one session's worth of interaction, storytelling and things like that. The campaigns, they are a lot longer. They can go on for years and years and years, depending on how often you meet, how often that you, how long your sessions are really. So if you have, say, a weekly session for 3 hours, jealous of those people that can actually pull that off. But even if you meet, say, every 2 or 3 weeks for a 3 or 4 hour session, campaigns can still run for a very, very long time. I think there's one that's been running for like 40 odd years, which, props to them for running it for so long. It sounds really, really hard, but also very, very rewarding at the same time. But there's also homebrew, so the DM can create entirely their own story, or they can run a pre-written module such as Curse of Strahd or Icewind Dale or Descent into Avernus, the latter of which I am running currently. And the story will be will all be laid out for you, so the DM will read the story and they will express it to the players, and the players will then go through that story with the DM. I do want to make a point of saying it's not DM versus players. It's not that at all. Even though the DM is creating the NPCs, like in combat, they will be the bandits, they will be the monsters, they will be the eventual BBEG, which is the big bad evil guy. But it is not players versus DM. It is the DM's characters versus the players' characters. It's collective storytelling, so you are going through this together. You're a team. There's no winning D&D. If you want to go into a D&D session and you want to be the person that wins D&D, don't be that person. Nobody likes that person. Go into D&D with an open mind, have your imagination caps on, and just have fun with it. And if you feel a little bit awkward about role playing at first, then that's completely fine. Everyone's a little bit awkward when they first start doing it. If you first start DMing and you're not sure what to do, and your players aren't sure what to do, it's fine to stop and say, look, I'm really not sure what we're doing. Shall we double check the rules? And that should be fine. I mean, I'm always double checking rules whenever I'm DMing. I constantly forget things. I also want to preface, I'm not saying that I'm an expert in D&D. I wish I was, but I'm not. But anyway. So like I said before, you will need the DM, you will need the players, you will need a set of dice. And one of the sets of dice I have here, this is one of the sets I got from Thornless Rose in our dice advent calendar. So you have a set of 7 dice, don't know if you can see that properly, and each have a different use, different function. So this is the D4, again, just 4-sided dice. You will have the D6. These have little pandas in them. I love these ones. Apologies to anyone wanting to co-host, especially if I don't know who you are. I'm not going to co-host anybody, not for this session. Maybe for other ones when I'm cooking, maybe, so we can have a chat, but not for this one. yeah, so this is the D6, again with a little panda in it. We have the D8. I did pick these not only because they're adorable to show you guys, but also because they're quite a little bit bigger. You do get different sets of different sizes. That's the D10. This one is the percentile, so it's like the D10, but it's got double figures. So as you can see there, it's got 80. It's got 80 and a double zero. It's got 40. So sometimes you'll need to roll on a D100 table to say get loot or like effects of certain spells, and you would roll a D10 and a percentile. This is a D12, again with a little panda inside, and this is the D20. Arguably the most important dice of the game. That this is the one that you will use most of the time. So yeah, so the other ones say, I don't know if you heard that, I think my neighbour's banging around outside. So for example, like the D4, that's what the weapon, the dagger, that's the damage dice that uses. The D12, that's what you use if you like swing a great axe, usually for a barbarian or a fighter. And D6, humble D6, if the wizard was going to cast fireball, they would roll 8 of these little beauties for their fire damage later on. But before you get into rolling the rolling for damage, rolling for ability checks and stuff like that, you need to know about the abilities, ability scores for your characters. There are 6, there are 3 physical, and there are 3 kind of social and mental personality wise. So you've got your strength, which allows you to lift or pull or push or break something. Your dexterity, which lets you know how nimble you are, how quick you are to getting out of the way of certain obstacles. Constitution, basically how hardy you are, how able you are to resist extreme weather or able to push the limits of your character's body. Your intelligence, so your skills of reasoning, able to recall information. Wisdom, noticing things in the environment, noticing things about other characters, other NPCs, or even creatures that you come across like wolves or bears in the forests and things like that. And you have your charisma, how well you are able to influence someone to do something or deceive someone, how well you're able to put on a performance as well. And these scores go from 1 to 20. Usually characters, it's advised you don't go too low, because especially with intelligence, maybe not intelligence, especially with constitution and strength as well. Constitution, that also equals how many hit points that you have, how many hit points that your character will be able to have. So if you go lower than 10, you're getting into the minuses. With constitution, that's not the best. And especially with the strength, that affects stuff like your carry weight. It also affects how it's not good. Try not to go into the minuses, especially with strength and constitution. If you're going to go into the minuses with like charisma and intelligence or wisdom, it does affect all the abilities, but personally I always find that strength and constitution especially, even if you're going to be a squishy little wizard, it's always good to have at least the average in constitution. And I'm well aware that I'm rambling. So you can go from 1 to 20 unless the rules state otherwise. Some monsters, these are like higher level CR monsters, the CR meaning challenge rating, they can go up to 30 in like their strength and constitution and things like that. But at level 1, you wouldn't really be coming across those unless your DM had a really, really cruel sense of humour. So 10 in these ability scores, that represents represents the average. But the more you go above 10, the more you go below 10, you get pluses or minuses in modifiers. So if you had a score of 12, you would get a +1 to your ability score. If you had a score of 14 or 15, you'd get a +2, and so on. So say you had a score of 16 in dexterity, you would get a +3 to your dexterity scores. So that would transfer over into skills. For dexterity, that also transfers into initiative order as well. Said skills are based off the abilities, apart from constitution. There's no skills that involve the constitution, but strength-based skills, there's only one, which is athletics. Basically does what it says on the tin, how athletic your character is. The dexterity skills are acrobatics, again, how nimble you are, how quick you're able to potentially flip over one of your comrades in combat. Also sleight of hand, so how well you're able to pickpocket someone, how well you're able to steal something without being noticed. And stealth, again, exactly what it says on the tin. So your intelligence skills are arcana, anything to do with magic or magical objects. History, how well you're able to recall history of a place or a thing or a person. Investigation, so how well you're able to gain information from say an area or from reading a book. Nature, again, how well you're able to discern potentially certain types of wildlife, certain types of plants, and also religion. So that's anything about religious people and religious artifacts, like gods and goddesses and things like that. Wisdom scores, you have your animal handling, so that's how well you're able to, say, tame or even befriend an animal. So say a druid was walking through the forest, they came across a wolf that looked startled and scared. Maybe they want to befriend it rather than fight it. They would use their animal handling skill there. Insight, which is how well you can discern emotions or feelings or intent from NPCs or creatures. Say you meet someone in the woods and you're not entirely certain that you trust what they're saying. Maybe they seem like a harmless old woman peddling their wares, and you roll an insight. Depending on if you meet the criteria, you could check and see whether or not she is actually who she says she is. Medicine, it's again another one that basically does what it says on the tin. You can check for certain diseases, certain effects of your comrades. You can also use it to administer first aid during combat. Perception, how well you're able to either see something or potentially hear something. Say you were hiding in a cave somewhere and you hear footsteps, or you hear dripping of water or howling of wind, and something that may lead to a hidden door. Couldn't get the words out for a second there. And the last wisdom skill is survival, so how well you're able to survive in a harsh circumstances. Charisma skills, deception. Again, these are all self-explanatory. Deception, performance, persuasion, and intimidation. Some DMs may let your character use their strength score instead of their charisma score for intimidation. When I was playing my first ever character, love my Vola, she has my whole heart. I think our characters had been out all day. We'd been in several rounds of combat. We'd been beaten. We'd been tossed around. And I was just like, my character is not in the mood. And we came across someone who was trying to steal something. So I said, I grabbed the NPC by the throat, and I just Vola will slam him into the wall. And I said, can I use my strength score rather than my charisma to intimidate him? And my DM, my brother, he said yes. So I was able to get quite a good intimidation off that. But if you were just using your words in order to threaten, say you captured a bandit and you were trying to threaten him verbally, then that would be a charisma check rather than a strength check. You do have proficiency in certain skills depending on your class, and I think races are depending on that as well. And your proficiency does scale, so you will get an extra two to those skills. So another example, I'm going to be giving so many examples here. If you had an 18 in dexterity and you were proficient in the stealth skill, then you would have a +4 to your dexterity from your ability score, and a +2, which will give a total of 6. So you would roll your d20, and whatever it lands on, let's just roll it now. And it was a 17. So I would get a total of 6 to that. So that would be a total of 23. So it'd be 17 plus 6 due to the proficiency I had in stealth. And that's a pretty good score, depending on the difficulty level of where it was that you were sneaking. It depends on whether or not you pass. But score at 23, it's pretty good. Where am I? So yeah, going on to difficulty classes. So we'd say the DC for something is a difficulty class. The DM will usually set this, or if it's in a pre-written module, they'll already be in there. So it can range from really, really easy, so a score of 5, to almost impossible, especially at lower levels, like levels 1 to 4. If the DC is something like 30, the chances are you're not going to hit it. It's extremely difficult to get that high, but it would depend on the situation that you're in. So the DM would set the difficulty class. You would roll your d20, and depending on the modifiers, you would either plus or minus. And if you have proficiency, you'd be able to plus that as well for the grand total, and you would have to see whether or not you pass or you fail. It's like a perception check. Some people might get a 10, some people might get a 15, and the people who got a 15 would notice that there's tracks in the dirt if you're in a forest. Or they might notice that if they're in an empty room, you might notice that the mug of tea or something like that, the mug is like it's still warm, so someone must have been here recently. Going on to different kinds of rolls. So you've got your ability checks, you've got your saving throws. So saving throws are for things like trying to dodge spells, or if something's falling, like if a bookcase is falling, or there are rocks in the environment, they're falling. The DM might ask for a dexterity saving throw, or if it's a spell, they might ask for a wisdom saving throw or a charisma saving throw. And some people, again, may have pluses or minuses depending on what their scores are. When you are rolling, you always want to try and, I say impose, you always want to get advantage. It's not always possible to get advantage, but when you do get advantage, it always helps. So that means, bear with me, you roll the d20 twice and you take the higher number. So that one was a 7 and a 16. So if you roll a 16 and a 7, at advantage you would use the 16, and at disadvantage you would use the 17. So that's for when if a character's helping, if someone else is helping your character to do something, then they'd be able to give them advantage. Or if they are, say they're walking on a slippery surface, they'd want the DMs might say roll at disadvantage, and you'd have to. It kind of shows what's happening in the scene, happening in the situation so far. Where am I with my notes? I took notes for a reason. Okay, so going back to what I said before, there's a social interaction and the role-playing aspect, there's the exploration, and there is combat. So, social interaction, like I said, players will interact with each other, so it'll be player characters role-playing with each other, or you'll role-play with the DM as different NPCs. The NPCs' attitudes can differ, can go from friendly to hostile, and they will react to the players' conversations, their actions, and they will react accordingly. So if you end up flattering and you butter up a merchant, you might be able to persuade the merchant and get a little bit of a discount to get a few health potions, get a freebie thrown in, something like that. But for example, on the other side, if you had been called to court by a lord or a noble or a king or a queen, and your characters ended up insulting them, that could potentially lead to imprisonment if they carry on insulting the noble in that way. And again, it shows they can help or they can hinder. So the NPC attitude does have an effect on the characters and their actions. The exploration, like I said before, you can be delving into a dungeon, you can be walking through a forest, you can be travelling along a road, you can be exploring a haunted castle, an abandoned museum, city, a village, a town, a tavern, pretty much anywhere that the DM can think up, you can basically explore. And it differs for each class, but your characters do start with adventuring equipment. So, for example, I think the rogue tends to have like thieves' tools. Like clerics and paladins start with like holy symbols that they can either attach to their armor or they can wear as chains around their neck. But the characters usually always start with generic things like a bedroll or a mess kit, rations, rope, water skins, things like that. Things you would need if you are going to be spending time on the road and you're not going to have luxuries like a bed to sleep in at night. And this does count towards the carrying capacity. I think I did mention that earlier on. So that is something to keep in mind as well when you are delving into those dungeons and you find big masses of treasure. You may become over encumbered, and the DM could decide like you physically can't move this treasure, you can't carry it, you're over encumbered, you won't be able to attack anyone, you won't be able to move properly. So that's always something to keep in mind. Also, whilst travelling, there are quite a lot of hazards that can potentially come your way. So if you are in a dungeon, you trigger a trap, and that might end up triggering fire damage. So you get the burning condition, you'd have to basically stop, drop and roll, otherwise you would incur, I think it's 1d4, so that little guy there, 1d4 of fire damage every few seconds. There's also things like suffocation. I think certain spells impose that, but also say if you fall into water, especially if your character's wearing heavy armour, they're going to have a harder time being able to keep themselves afloat. So being underwater and not being able to breathe, that would be a problem, and your character would start to suffocate. There's also dehydration and malnutrition. Put my teeth back in. And in short rests and long rests, especially the long rest, it does say the rules to your character must at least eat and drink something. And if they don't do this, they will get levels of exhaustion, and that will impose penalties on ability checks and saving throws and things like that. So it is important to say when you're doing a long rest, having a short rest, things like that, it's like you're important to say, so like, yeah, I do, I drink enough, I eat enough, I do take the required rest for me to get the benefits of a long rest. There's also falling, which is a big hazard, especially if you're atop a cliff. For every 10 feet that you fall, you get 1d6 of bludgeoning damage. I think it's bludgeoning damage. Yeah, I think it's bludgeoning damage. So it's this for a maximum of 20d6. So you really don't want to be falling at all at lower levels. But if you fall, say 20 or 30 feet at level 1, you're going to be in for a bad time, especially if you're a squishy little wizard. Also, when travelling, marching order is quite important, especially I feel like it's important if you're in a dungeon and the walkways are quite narrow, because there may be traps up ahead, there may be enemies up ahead. So people who are at the front, they are going to be at the receiving end of any enemies, any traps, any pitfalls or anything like that. Even in places like a forest, because people at the front may not notice, but the DM could have the people at the back roll a perception check, and depending on how high they roll, they may see bandits lurking around the corner, they may see goblins waiting to attack, which can also later on in like when I come across combat, when I speak about combat, they could have like a surprise round on some of the party, but not the rest of the party. Speaking of combat, that is what is up next in my notes. So in combat, there are basically 3 things you can do. You can take an action, you can use your movement speed, and you can take your bonus action. There are several things that you can do with your action, and I'll list those later. But for example, the DM describes you walking through a forest, and you notice that there are shadows up front. Bandits appear, they leer at you, and the DM will say, roll me initiative. So everybody, including the bandits, will roll a d20, and whoever gets the highest number to the lowest number, that is the order of combat. So that's the order of who will attack who and when. So for your initiative, you will roll the d20 and you'll add your dexterity modifier. So if you had a dexterity score of 8, you would roll the d20, but then you would -1. If you had a dexterity score of 16, you'd roll the d20 and add 3. So that just shows how quick off the mark you are. So the DM will roll for the bandits or the monsters, basically the enemies against the player characters. The rules say for ties and initiative, the DM will decide on who goes first, and the players decide amongst themselves. I don't know where we got it from, but we've always used dexterity. So say if two characters get a 10 in their initiative roll, the person with the higher dexterity goes first, and if they've got the same dexterity, we'll roll again for it. Not entirely sure where we got that. It's just something that we've always done. And it also says that the DM rolls once for all enemies, and then they have the initiative all at the same time, which I guess, thinking back on especially some of the Avernus sessions that I've run, because we do have a large group, we have 7 players, running combat was quite difficult because I always run individually for enemies. It kind of splits it up a little bit, rather than say having 5 skeletons attacking all at once and then the players having a go. For me, I just find it a little bit more engaging if they say like a couple of the party, and then there's a skeleton, and then another member of the party, and then 2 more skeletons, and then 3 members of the party, or however many people that you have during combat. I just find it kind of breaks it up a little bit more. Plus, when it gets to enemies with higher levels of intelligence, if they're gonna go first all at once, I feel like if you're gonna play true to that enemy's intelligence, they're just gonna gang up on certain members of the party and potentially take out 1 or 2 members of the party before they've even got a chance to act, especially if they get high score in their initiative. So again, it is completely up to you, but that's how we've always done it. Thinking about it now, though, sometimes I think it would have been at least a little bit simpler to have all of the enemies go all at once in Avernus. But it is what it is, and I'll probably continue to play the way I play. So, going back to the actions that you can take within combat. Usually this constitutes an attack. And you can attack either with a weapon, so you've got your daggers, you've got your long swords, you've got your short bows, you've got your crossbows. You can attack with a spell. You can also use an unarmed attack. So if you didn't have any weapons near you, you would be able to either punch them, kick them, that sort of thing. You can also dash, which gives you more movement. You can disengage, which means that the movement that you do take for the rest of the round doesn't provoke attacks of opportunity, and I'll get to those in a little bit. You can dodge, so that means attacks against you have disadvantage. Again, roll this twice, and the enemy will take the lowest of the two. And you have advantage on dexterity saving throws. And again, it's the opposite. Advantage, roll this twice, take the higher number. You can help an ally, so you can help their attack roll, you can help their... you can administer first aid, so you can stabilise them if they've reached 0 hit points. And you can hide as well. That does incur a stealth check, but those are the things you can take as an action. Movement, you can move your base walking speed. Movement has slightly changed from the 2014 version. There we go. In the 2014 version, there were a couple of races that had slightly lower base walking speed. So it was the dwarf, it was the halfling, and the gnome. They all had 25 foot base walking speed. All the other races had 30, apart from the wood elf, who had 35. And now in the 2024 version of the Player's Handbook, they all have 30 base walking speed, so including the dwarf, halfling, and the gnome, apart from the Goliath and the wood elf, who both have 35. So that's something that I'll need to remember, because I'm going to end up forgetting. We're hoping to have an Icewind session in the next couple of weeks, and my cleric is a dwarf, so I'll have to try and remember that. But yeah, so each square of the grid for combat, that is 5 foot. So you'd be able to move 6 squares for 30 foot of base walking speed. The speed can also include stuff like swimming, depending if you're in water or if your character has flying speed. They can also use the flying speed as well. You can also break up the movement, so you don't have to take all of your movement and then do your action, or do your action and then do all your movement. So you could say potentially move 15 foot, and then you could make your attack, then move the rest of your movement as well. And so you can break it up. There's no saying that you have to do all or one, just, all in the same. I don't know where I was going with that. I think my brain my brain started speaking and it kind of trailed off. Let's just continue. Anyway, so you got your movement. In order to make an attack, you choose your target. So within it's like a ranged attack or a melee attack. If it's going to be melee, it has to be next to you. And if it's ranged, obviously it's at a range. If you were going to hit an enemy with a ranged weapon and they were in the square next to you, you would be rolling to attack at disadvantage. But yes, you would choose your enemy, roll to attack, add any modifiers that you had, and then you would let the DM know what you rolled. They would then let you know if it hit or not, and if it hits, you get to roll your damage. So for example, a dagger does 1d4. Like I said before, where is it? There we go. A great axe does 1d12. And if you were going to cast a spell, like I said before, the fireball does 8d6. And if you hit a 1, that is a critical fail. If you roll a 20, that is a critical success. So no matter how high an enemy's armor class is, the 20 will hit no matter what. And if you do manage to get a 20, you get to double your damage die. So if you stab an enemy with a dagger and you get a critical 20, you get to roll this guy twice and then add any modifiers on top of that. Again, with the great axe, you'd get to roll that one twice, add any modifiers. And if you crit with a fireball, you get to roll 16 d6 for that lovely, lovely fire damage. And when I said before, it's you need at least one set of dice to play. Later on, it does help to have several sets of dice. So I do have, at the moment, only have 4d6 here. I can pick them up to show you. I've got 4d6 there. This is nowhere near the amount of dice I have in my collection. The little dice goblin that I am. But yeah, later levels, it definitely helps because you do end up rolling more damage die against your enemies. Cover is it's also something that can be utilised within combat. It applies to both the characters and the enemies. And you can have half cover, 3/4 cover, or full cover, which then increases the armor class of the character or the enemy. So it increases how hard it is for them to get hit. Opportunity attacks, which I believe I spoke about before. Did I speak about opportunity attacks before? I think I may have been talking about bonus actions. I've had a long day at work. My thread of consciousness is just all over the place at the moment. I will try and tie that thread off. Anyway, so opportunity attacks. So that happens when, for example, if an enemy is going past your character in combat, then your character will get what's called an attack of opportunity. It's basically just a quick reaction, so you can lash out at them with your dagger, your great axe, and it's just an extra little bit of damage that you can deal to the enemy. That also works for your characters as well. So if you are going past an enemy's square, then they will be able to get an attack of opportunity off on you as well. So you've done your action, you've done your movement. Bonus actions are something that you can do as well. Certain spells are classed as bonus actions and can be cast. As a rogue, you can dash, disengage, and dodge as a bonus action rather than using it as an action. And druids, for example, can wild shape as bonus action as well. In the 2014 version, druids, if you were a Circle of the Moon druid, you had combat wild shape, which is what Thea, my high elf druid in Curse of Strahd, she was a Circle of the Moon druid, and she had combat wild shape, so she could wild shape as a bonus action rather than a full action. But they've updated it in the 2024 version, so all druids get to wild shape as a bonus action, which I quite enjoy. I do like a good druid. You can speak in combat, but bear in mind that combat's supposed to be about 6 seconds, an entire round of combat, so everything is happening extremely quickly. So you wouldn't be able to give a detailed plan to your party members. You could shout for help if other party members weren't actually in combat time yet, so you could shout for them to help and get them to run over and get themselves into combat. Or you could shout something like, don't kill them, we need to question them. Hopefully that, they would leave a couple of bandits alive, or cultists. Cultists are fresh on the brain from playing Avernus. But yeah, so you can't give detailed explanations of what you think your party members should do, because again, a combat round is 6 seconds, so it's quite quick, quite snappy. In combat, obviously, there are daggers, there are swords, there are arrows, there are spells flying everywhere. It's inevitable that you are going to gain damage. So it's important to keep track of your hit points. And hit points are determined by the class that you choose. So, for example, the hit points for the Barbarian will be determined by the D12. And the hit points for the squishy wizard would be a D6. It's like I said before as well, the constitution also aids in your hit points. So if you have a higher constitution, you will have a higher hit points, higher amount of hit points. And when those hit points reduce to 0, your character will fall unconscious. But the amount of damage that you take, that will roll over as well. So there's something called your hit point maximum. If you had 12 hit points in total, and your character was at currently at 3 hit points, if your character got 15 points of damage from an enemy, they would be gone. They would be dead. because that would be their hit point maximum. It's kind of double your character's hit points, basically. If it goes equal to or more than your character's hit points past 0, then it's basically insta-death. There are spells that you can use to resurrect characters and things like that. They do, they're gained at higher level and things like that, but yeah, if you go past your hit point maximum, your character is gone. If they are not gone, you enter what is called death saves. So you will need you will need 3 successes, and you will be up and on 1 hit point. If you hit 3 failures, again, your character is dead. So a 1 is a critical fail. That counts as 2 fails. A 20 is a critical success. Your character is up and on 1 hit point, so they are brought back from unconsciousness. In between that, 2 to 9 is a fail, so that would count as 1 failure. 10 to 19 is 1 success, and again, the critical 1 and the critical 20, I've already explained those. If you do take damage whilst you're in death saves, that's an automatic fail as well. And if the attack is a critical hit, that is 2 fails. So it can always, it's always quite tense when someone goes into death saves. And depending on the rule at the table, will depend on how more tense it is. Sometimes the DM will roll for the character behind the DM screen, so nobody knows whether or not that character has got any successes, if they've got any fails, anything like that. For Avernus, I've ruled that I'm going to roll behind the DM screen. I'm not going to let the characters know what I've rolled unless it comes to the final roll. So for example, say they had 2 successes, say they had 2 fails, I would then give my dice to the player and say, this is the last roll, and whatever they roll, it basically determines the fate of their character. So if they roll 9 or lower, they're gone. If they roll a 10 or higher, they're obviously back on their feet. But again, it kind of, if the rolls are done, death saves are done out in the open, it kind of, the other players are like, right, okay, so they've got 2 successes, they're fine. I can carry on fighting the the bandits or the whatever enemy that you're facing at the time. They're fine. They can last another round or so. But doing it behind the DM screen, I quite like it because it's again, it adds to the tension. Healing back those hit points is done usually by like health potions, healing spells, and a short rest or a long rest. So short rests are for an hour. You're not doing anything strenuous at all. It's literally just sitting still and composing yourself. And within that short rest, you can take your hit die, whatever that may be. So it'd be either a D12, D10, D8, or D6, depending on your class. And you would get those hit points back. You can get certain aspects of your class back as well once you have a short rest. A long rest is 8 hours minimum. So you would be again, like doing nothing strenuous, just sort of talking, eating, drinking, reading, maybe tinkering with something, depending on your class, but then sleeping for 6 hours. Also, you can include watch time in that as well. But say you wanted to, you could rest for 10 hours, sleep for 6 hours, and do other things within that 4-hour time period. But the 8 hours is the minimum required for the long rest. And on that long rest, you would recover all your hit points. You would recover any spell slots that you expended, any racial qualities. So like the Dragonborn, you'd get your your breath weapon back and things like that. So that's what you get on a long rest. During combat, there's different damage types. So you have your piercing, slashing, and bludgeoning. So piercing from, say, arrows, slashing from swords, and bludgeoning from hammers or clubs. And then spells do different types of damage, like fire damage, force damage, necrotic damage, things like that. Some characters would have resistance. So if you have a resistance to a certain type of damage, that damage type against you would be halved. So say I rolled 4 fire damage and your character was resistant to fire damage, they would only take 2 points of damage, whereas other people would take the full 4. And the reverse of that is true for vulnerability. If I rolled 4 fire damage and your character was vulnerable to fire damage, they would take 8 fire damage, whereas other characters would then take the 4. There are also temporary hit points. Certain spells can give temporary hit points, but once they're gone, they're gone. And they can't be healed as well. So say you had 10 temporary hit points and you got damaged for 9, you would have 1 temporary hit point, but you would not then be able to take a health potion or get healed by a spell, and those temporary hit points be restored. They literally, it's in the name, it's temporary. Once it's gone, it's gone. And other things that can happen within combat. So you have things called conditions. So spells, certain things that enemies can do as well will impose certain conditions on you. So you have the blinded spell. Again, self-explanatory. You would fail any perception checks that need sight, and your attacks are made. You make your attacks at disadvantage, whereas attacks against you have advantage because you can't see. Charmed. Certain spells can cause this. If your character's charmed, they can't attack the charmer, and any social interactions have advantage against your character from the charmer. Deafened, similar to the blinded one, you can't hear anything, so you fail those saves. There's exhaustion, but I will go into exhaustion afterwards because there's changes to it from the 2014 version. Frightened, so you have disadvantage on any ability checks and attack throws while you're in the line of sight of whatever it is that frightened you. So if you kind of move and you can't see whatever it is that frightened you, the disadvantage is no longer imposed, and you also can't willingly move closer to whatever it is that frightened you. Grappled. So you can be restrained by an enemy. They can drag you. Your speed is reduced to 0 because you're actually, you're grabbed by an enemy. Incapacitated. You're inactive. You don't have any concentration. So any spells that require concentration, that is broken once you are incapacitated. And obviously, incapacitated, can't speak or anything like that. If you have the invisible condition, so certain spells will give your characters activity. So you have advantage on initiative because nobody can see where you are. You have you're concealed, obviously, because nobody can see you. Attacks against you have a disadvantage, and you have advantage on your attacks again because nobody can see you. Certain spells, I think it's the invisibility spell. This will break after you attack, and things like greater invisibility won't. I will double check that once we get to that point in the player's handbook for this lovely D&D 101 live series. The paralyzed condition, you become incapacitated, so obviously you can't move, your speed's reduced to 0, you fail strength and dex saves, and attacks against you have advantage. Petrified, you are basically turned into solid substance, usually stone, and any conditions that you have, they're kind of like frozen in time. You won't be able to move, you fail strength and dex saves again. Anything that you have with you, that's also turned to stone. If you are poisoned, you have disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks. Prone, that means just you've fallen over, you've been like knocked over, usually by, I think it's direwolves are able to knock any characters prone during their attack, but also if you like certain spells, if it blasts you backwards, you are knocked prone then as well. So you can spend half your movement to stand up. So like I said before, the base movement speed is 30 and you would have to spend 15 foot of movement to stand up. You could then move the rest of your movement if you have the full movement. If you don't have the movement, then you're unable to stand up, unfortunately. Restrained, again, your speed is 0. Attacks against you have advantage. Stunned, you're incapacitated. You automatically fail your strength and dex saves. Attacks against you have disadvantage. And unconscious, obviously, you are completely inert. You're incapacitated. You're prone. Just unconscious. It does what it says on the tin. So I'm going back to exhaustion now. There are 6 levels. Well, technically 5, because on the 6th level you just die. It's just for both. It says level 6 of exhaustion, you die. That's literally what it says in the rules. But for the new version, it has a minus to checks. So all ability checks, all saving throws and attack rolls. And it has a minus to speed. So for level 1, it's -2 to the checks and -5 foot speed. Level 2 is -4 and -10 foot speed. Level 3, -6. Level 4, -8. Level 5, -10. So whatever you roll, say you rolled a perception, and I just got... terrible, that was a 3. So at one level of exhaustion, you would have been dropped down to a 1. It's not a natural 1. It's an unnatural 1, but it's still a pretty poor score. But the levels of exhaustion just kind of, they scale and they show how much, just how bad it is. So like either not sleep properly, not take enough food, not take enough water. And it is different. These rules are slightly different from the Legacy version. So Legacy version, 2014 version, level 1 is disadvantage on ability checks. Level 2, you get your speed halved. Level 3, disadvantage on attacks and saving throws. Level 4, hit point maximum halved. Level 5, speed is to 0. So we've never really gotten past level, like maybe 2 levels of exhaustion in past sessions. We've never really gotten like that deep into it, but I don't know. It's something. It's new rules. It's something to be aware of when we're playing in future, and we will see. We'll see if the new exhaustion rules are better. It's if it's any easier. Yeah, it will be fun to figure out, because maybe this might be a little spoiler for any potential players watching now or later when I post this on YouTube. Maybe exhaustion is coming to you in Avernus. Don't mind my little DM chuckle just there. And I think for this live, I think that's it. That was the first chapter. It's basically just, I do feel like I have just dumped a load of info, but that's the basis of D&D. And what it is, again, it's collective storytelling. Socially interact between the characters and the NPCs that the DM plays, exploration of different environments within the D&D setting, and combat. And again, depending on the party that you're with, some people really like the roleplay aspect, some people really, really like combat and the mechanics of it. Some people like a mix of both, and it just depends on the people that you play with. It is good to have a mix of both roleplay and combat, because certain combats can get a little bit tedious at times, especially if there's a lot going on. It can be a lot to remember. But I think I'm going to leave that there. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to try and answer them as best I can. And I will be back next Friday, and we will be going into the next chapter, how to create your character. So we might be looking at a few different species. They have added some new ones. Like I said, the Goliath has been added. The Asimar, the Asimar, however you want to pronounce that, that has been added. And I'm pretty sure they've added some new classes as well. So I will be delving deeper into the Player's Handbook myself and making more notes for you guys for the live next Friday. So for those who have joined in, those who have liked, thank you very much. any interaction, any and all interaction is very much welcome, and me and my monster shall say goodbye for now. Thank you very much, and I will see you in the next live.